certainty of death plays a central role in the Buddhist belief system, and ultimately deeply affects the Buddhist view on life itself. As morbid as it may seem, the reality of the matter is that on average, 200,000 people die each day. All that are born will succumb to death. On one occasion, to illustrate this point, the Buddha asked several of the monks, "How often do you contemplate death?" One of them replied, "Lord, I contemplate death every day." "Not good enough," the Buddha said, and asked another monk, who replied, "Lord, I contemplate death with each mouthful that I eat during the meal." "Better, but not good enough," said the Buddha. "What about you?" The third monk replied, "Lord, I contemplate death with each inhalation and each exhalation." The impermanence of life, a founding principle of Buddhist doctrine, exhibits itself in this idea that at some point we will exhale, only to have no inhalation follow. The attachment to this impermanence is what drives the suffering experience in samsara. The Buddhist doctrine of pratishasamutpada illustrates this immutable flux of coming into existence and ceasing from existence. Instead of being feared, Buddhist teachings embrace death as a means of escaping samsara. Through a cultivation of shunyata and the abandonment of the ego, one can reach a level of true awareness, allowing one to be fully engaged in each experience. This awareness permits one to realize that the experience of death does not completely affect one's true consciousness. Through reincarnation, one's consciousness will remain after death to seek out a new body and new life. Tibetan Buddhism presents a unique perspective on the precise details of the reincarnation process. Tibetan sects hold the belief that the spirit of the recently deceased undergoes an existential progression lasting 49 days. The process is separated into 3 distinct stages known to the Tibetans as bardos. The first bardo stage, known specifically as the Shirkai bardo, or bardo of the moment of death, begins at the moment of death and can last from half a day to up to 4 days. During this short period of time, the deceased experiences the sensation described as a clear white light of reality. Those who have had near-death experiences often typify their encounter with death with a description of similar phenomena. In the course of the second bardo, distinguished by the Tibetans as the Shonyid bardo, or the bardo of experiencing reality, the spirit has realized that it is no longer restrained by the corporeal reality of the body. Hallucinations occur rapidly as a consequence of the karma accumulated during one's lifetime. Visions of both scornful and amicable deities then appear. These apparitions, however, are an embodiment of the departed's emotions, and in order to attain complete enlightenment, one must encounter each deity with full resolve. The final bardo, identified as the Sidpa bardo, the bardo of rebirth, encapsulates the process of reincarnation itself. To facilitate the safe and easy passage through these bardo stages, in the course of successive centuries, the Tibetan people have cultivated several burial rituals that are performed following the death of a close one. Sky or celestial burial, known as Jator, is the most prominent and lasting of these rituals. Drepung Monastery is one of the few sacred places where the practice of sky burial is allowed to take place. Prior to death, the ill person is fed native Tibetan herbs mixed with the burnt ashes of the drapery, hair, and nails of living Buddhas. Lamas from the monastery often burn incense and chant prayers over the body, while women and children are generally restricted from contact with the individual, who may soon pass. These practices can vary, though. It is really not until death that the true formal procedures begin. Shortly following death, the face of the departed is covered with a cloth and all are forbidden to touch the body. Monks gather to take part in the Phowa ceremony, said to help in the soul's evacuation of the body. The body is then disassembled by a few chosen Ragyapas. The strongman who performs the ritual then grinds the meat off the skeleton and crushes the bones into powder. The bone powder is mixed thoroughly with the brains of the deceased so that the vultures can digest everything. Once reduced to a pulpy consistency, the remains are mixed with tsampa, or barley powder. The remains are finally placed on an area, usually a flat rock of some sort, at dawn above the ground where flocks of vultures then flock to. Unlike Western culture, where the vulture is usually regarded as a bad omen, or a pest at least, the bird is seen to reflect at least 2 inherently Buddhist principles: refraining from killing, as well as taking in the natural course of events. and that vultures usually do not kill but rather feed off whatever they may find. No outsiders are allowed to view the ritual. The offering of the flesh to the vultures is deemed as an act of generosity and compassion by giving oneself to sustain the life of another. If the vultures consume all of the remains, it is assumed as a favorable sign, meaning that the soul of this being has accumulated great positive karma through his lifetime. If any of the remains remain, this is generally regarded as a negative sign, and the rest of the body is burned, and further scripture is chanted in the name of the deceased in order to generate some good karma and make the bardo passage less troublesome. With the Chinese occupation of Tibet in subsequent years, the custom of ritual sky burial, along with numerous other Tibetan traditions, was outlawed and maliciously attacked by Chinese authorities. The procedures associated with sky burial were often used in the early years by the Chinese government to justify their rule by pointing to the barbaric and primitive nature of pre-communist Tibet. Though the ritual itself may seem grotesque to outsiders, it enjoys a long lineage within Tibet and is only meant as a sign of respect and mourning for the deceased. In the 1980s, China once more made the practice of sky burial in Tibet legal. The practice remains a Tibetan tradition.